One dimension of this Pakistan factor, if it can be called that, is the recent military pact between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. It's been compared to a NATO-style alliance because of Article 5 of NATO, which says an attack on, like NATO, an attack on one country will be considered an attack on both. Now, experts have pointed out that it's highly unlikely that Saudi Arabia will ever, send troops against India in any kind of Operation Sindoor type conflict. But there are two concerns here. One, it's a kind of legitimacy that Pakistan is accorded. Pakistan gets to sit at a table in New York with Trump talking about the situation in West Asia. Two, there are those like Hussein Haqqani, Pakistan's former ambassador to America, who says, hey, this allows Pakistan to buy American weapons using Saudi funds. I just want to understand from you how much of a concern this is, this new 15 seconds of fame that Pakistan has.
Well, Barkha, thank you very much. And first of all, it's a great pleasure to join very eminent and distinguished seniors with whom I've had the opportunity to work on some very consequential projects in the Ministry of External Affairs. Also, thanks to Quorum for inviting me. A metaphor of Gurgaon with the private fantasy and public nightmare. So, but I could not have, I'll be leaving Gurgaon soon, so I couldn't have left without actually coming to...
You know that those four words would also describe Donald Trump.
Yes.
Private fantasy and public nightmare.
But Barkha, before I get to that question, I'd like to, first of all, speak in a little more structural terms about the India-US relations, on which I worked for 15 years. And also to your first point about Pakistan relationship of the kind of pivot that hasn't been since the 1970s. I think, first of all, I'm surprised that we are surprised. One, with Pakistan, there have been many U-turns in US-Pakistan relations that do not end well for either side. First of all, remember, for 50 years, they were actual formal allies. They fought in the trenches together. There are deep institutional linkages between the military on both sides. I can tell you anecdotally that when Prime Minister Vajpayee invited general transitioning into President Musharraf for Agra. I was in Washington, D.C. when we went and met Richard Armitage, who was the Deputy Secretary of State. He said, how can you invite him? Can you look him in the eye and trust him? I have been in trenches with him. The point I'm making is that there are very deep institutional relationship. In May, I'll give you one example of how these U-turns work. May 11, 2001, Richard Armitage comes to Delhi, Seoul, and Tokyo to explain President Bush's new strategic framework. And at that time, coming out of RCR, then RCR, now LKM, he almost alluded to the possibility of Pakistan being declared a rogue state, right? 9/11 happens. And then the first thing the Americans told us, don't piggyback us. And don't use us to go after Pakistan. December 2001, they gave us a formal démarche saying, do not open consulates in Jalalabad and Herat, Mazar-e-Sharif, because it is upsetting Pakistan. I still keep a copy of that diplomatic note as a reminder of follies of diplomacy. And so you can see that sort of U-turns that take place for purely tactical reasons. One of the reasons is this, and I'll come to why there are structural problems. American decision-making is always sequential and linear. They deal with one short-term problem without bothering about the consequences of what they might have to deal with later. So at that point of time, they told us, stay out of it. The bargain President Musharraf stuck with the US was this: you can go after Al-Qaeda because they hurt you. I will keep Taliban under check because they were not directly complicit in the attack. But I will do nothing to Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed. Americans accepted that bargain at that point of time. The same thing, okay, then you see every year progressively they are being taken for a ride. And then they keep giving more money. Then Ambassador Arun Singh was DCM, I was there. I remember working the Congress on the Kerry-Berman-Lugar bill, on which we tried and got about 20 conditions imposed. The State Department directly intervened with the Senate and got 10 of them removed, saying that it's going to irritate Ashfaq Kyani. They were, of course, in love with Ashfaq Kyani at that point of time, because then the logic was so superficial that he drinks whiskey, he smokes cigar, and that he has a dog at home, so he must be a moderate Muslim, and who can then work with us. They forgot about that he's running a Pakistan military. So those U-turns will happen, and usually in the first part of any new administration, particularly one which has absolutely, as both ambassadors have pointed out, no wise, experienced people in geopolitics, but MAGA ideologues running it, except perhaps Marco Rubio, that there is a seduction of Pakistan, and that there is a feeling that they can get what they want out of it. Remember, every SHO that we know, Thanedar, usually needs one rogue in his locality.
The local gunda.
The local gunda who is allowed to continue to do a few messing around, but is helpful to the SHO.
Correct.
When it comes to it. So they pick up, see, remember March, in the State of the Union address, President Trump mentions Pakistan's counter-terrorism cooperation. Second, I have never seen United States abandon the state of Pakistan. They may take cosmetic steps of banning LET and JEM, but directly implicating Pakistan. I pointed this out in 2003 when there was a direct barter between Pakistan and North Korea, Shaheen missiles for uranium, and Nodong missile for uranium enrichment. The United States used the most disingenuous way of sanctioning Pakistan, which was toothless, but used the Full Arms Export Control Act, Section 73, to target North Korea, and therefore North Korea was separated from Pakistan. So this will go on. The state of Pakistan, for the reasons that have been pointed out, is extremely important. One more thing. It isn't just about terrorism or a nuclear armed state which has a gun to its head. It is also a deep belief in the United States that it is possible to find a way to get at least some basic rights vis-a-vis China. Why? Because in the event of a conflict, today the United States only has a Pacific front. It doesn't have a Western front. And so Central Asia is largely out of bounds, Iran is out of bounds, and there is always that need to remain engaged. But we should never be surprised about these U-turns, but we have in the past navigated past these, including when Obama thought in his interview to Ron Klein in Time magazine, he said the road to peace in Kabul lies through Islamabad and Delhi. So Richard Holbrooke was supposed to be a special envoy. Ambassador Singh was also there at that time. We told them that it's a kiss of death if you get into this, so he was kept out. We will get past all of this also, because I think that hyphenation is really something that is either in our minds. But on the United States-India relations in January, when we were the most triumphantly welcoming President Trump's election, and when now it hasn't aged well, when the minister said that the world may be nervous about President Trump, but India is not among those countries. Now, if you see, as he's pointed out, his first term, there were enough clues in that. One, his proclivity towards peacemaking and mediation came through. Second, he was, I think, had declared us as a tariff king even then. Third, the pressure on Russia was very strong. And I am sorry to say that we also agreed to scale back oil purchases from Iran as a policy decision, not as a market decision. That gives you the impression that a country is amenable to pressure. We didn't do that in 2012, I have to say this, when Iran was declared the primary jurisdiction of money laundering concern. We insisted and we used UCO Bank to ring fence And UCO Bank was the source through which we were importing. And then CAATSA sanctions. There was a lot of pressure on us. And there was a one-time waiver for this S-400. I mean, I was there in that meeting with General Mattis, and then Defense Minister, and he was insistent on it. So the signals were there. But here is a set of structural problems. Because we have been so caught up in the rhetoric of the defining partnership of the 21st century on both sides, and as one of the speechwriters, I've been guilty of that also, that the reality and the rhetoric seems to get blurred. And here are the things. One is that the geopolitical order in which India-US relations is transformed no longer exists. Russia-US relations were not as fraught as they are. China was not the big power that it is today. Second, we had this belief in a sui generis relationship. That is, we are aligned on some issues, we are not allies. And that there will be tension and limitations between a unipolar United States with a neat dichotomy between allies and adversaries, and a multipolarly inclined India with a deep sense of strategic autonomy. But the belief was that we can navigate past all these differences because of the larger shared vision of international order. That's centered around China. Okay. Now we come to a point, and so therefore we over-signaled on Quad without settling the bilateral terms of our relationship, which is now coming to haunt us. And we then have now a president who is actually not an aberration, he's a culmination of a process that began in the United States in 2008. And it has gone, and we can discuss this in a subsequent thing. So he is economic, not geopolitical. So the classic US policy has been to prevent the rise of another global hegemon that challenges its hegemonic position. For Trump, it is the economic consequences of China's rise that bothers him the most. You've never heard him speak about the indispensability of American leadership in upholding the international order. He doesn't get into all of that. It's to make America great again, even if it means I trample over everyone. The strategy is different. Classical American strategy is as follows: direct containment of China through technology, finance, trade measures, but also build an informal and formal alliance of partners who could act as the countervailing force. So Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and India.
Yeah.
Right? For Trump, it is, this pillar doesn't exist. It is, I'll deal directly with China. So salience of the partners in dealing with this, and they have come down, and therefore the capacity of or the tolerance for differences with the United States will continue to decrease. That leads to a very, very serious question which we have to think through. So you've seen that the two countries that get the first letters on trade are Korea and Japan. 75 years of treaty alliance. Australia, 368 billion Australian dollars committed to AUKUS. They don't know where it is going, right? We, of course, you've already heard what we have been going through. Then the question that arises about Indo-Pacific, which is the fulcrum, because we've made the India-US relationship the cornerstone of our security architecture in the Indo-Pacific. Will he continue to treat security as a public good in the Indo-Pacific?
Yeah.
Or will he retreat to the United States' traditional Western periphery in the Pacific, by the way, which has been there since 1783?
Yeah.
So this question will mean that you would end up maybe down the line in a situation from what we call China +1 to in US +1. And hedging is happening. They walked out of TPP. What happened? CPTPP came up. Somebody else took the lead, and today CPTPP, UK is joining. EU wants to join. Can you imagine this new trade order that is built without the United States?
Yeah.
So the US has a fundamental problem since 2008, which is that it no longer finds the global order and the institutions that it was the architect of either attractive or useful to it. And therefore, this retreat started from President Obama, and it is continuing over a period of time. So this is something we have to understand. As far as the, sorry, I just got a bit too detailed into this, but on the Saudi Pakistan, first, of course, that we deluded ourselves into believing that Pakistan is isolated. If you tell yourself repeatedly that someone is isolated, doesn't make that person isolated. I mean, that is, it has an ebb and flow. Pakistan's always maintained its relationships below the radar. We started taking pride in the fact that our discussions had almost left out Pakistan, which is an anomaly. If you don't discuss your own neighbors, then there's something fundamentally wrong with us. Then comes, see, here there is a very interesting aside. First of all, and here's quite an expert on disarmament. You have, forget about the substance of it, there is a symbolism. But that relationship in an informal way has been there with Gulf countries for a very long time. There's no question about it. When this agreement is done, it also, unfortunately for Saudi Arabia, takes one very important demand that they have had on the United States away. The US will say, now you have a mutual defense pact with a nuclear weapons power. Why do you need enrichment technology? Now you just stay out of this. As far as the capacity of Pakistan to provide extended deterrence or nuclear umbrella, as that comment, it's a highly, highly debatable issue, and there's a whole lot of technical questions on command and control, delivery systems, decision-making, etc., that will not come into play. The reality is that their first use will be against Houthis. Yemen is a country which the House of Saud has not been able to pacify for 200 years. On the debris of the Ottoman Empire, when the House of Saud conquered the peninsula, Hijaz, except for where the Hashemites were sent off to Transjordania and the British kept the Emirates, Yemen was the only country they could not subdue. They continue to do that. They will need those forces to try and pacify it, because Houthis represent a serious institutional threat to the House of Saud for a number of reasons, including the fact that they have very strong links with Iran.
Yeah.
So I would say that, you know, we, as far our own security interests are concerned, perhaps not of great consequence. The fact that Pakistan today is back a bit in the eyes. And I will tell you one more reason why this is happening. This is the global public perception of Operation Sindoor. There is, no matter what we say, the way the narrative was built, the way we were able to, strategic communication, whatever it was, the initial perception that has shaped us that Pakistan was able to match India. And therefore the mediation happened. So when they look at India and when they look at Pakistan, they'll start looking at it as a credible military force that can stand up to a country like India. Contrary-wise, it will raise questions about your ability to counter China when people start feeling that maybe perhaps India was not a, maybe it was a 7-6 tiebreak, not a 6-love, 6-2, which they would have expected in tennis parlance from an India-Pakistan. And it isn't, nothing, I'm not saying this is reality, but this is the perception. And a perception that we started trying to change way too late when it was already formed.